morning, Laura.
Morning, Henry. How are you?
I am fantastic. I'm buzzing for the second day of the conference and all that it contains. I'm thrilled to be kicking off the ADHD UK segment and day with you. We've talked over a number of months. To say that you're a passionate advocate and it's to underplay significantly what you're doing is pioneering and absolutely fantastic. You've got slides. I need to hand over to you.
Thank you. And I think, on that, I'm a passionate advocate. I think if what I'm going to speak about in this presentation, if we can get more people with ADHD or other neurodivergence into government, I think there would be a wave. I think it's the passion that comes from a lot of different people. So thank you. So yeah, my segment here is leading with lived experience and about how we get ADHD and neurodivergent voices into government and how change really happens. So who am I? So I'm, as Henry introduced me, a councillor for Newport in Wales, social services cabinet member. I also have a full-time job as well with, I work for Orange, the telecoms company, and I'm a fraud and data analytics manager, also an ADHD ambassador, parent of 2 neurodivergent children, and I myself have a diagnosis of ADHD, autism, and dyslexia. So I wear a number of different hats. So for me, my lived experience is every part of my being, really. So what brought me into politics? It wasn't. I never set out to become a politician. Watched the news when I was in my teens. Maybe didn't understand. Had no interest in politics, but I'm sure this would perhaps resonate with a lot of other people on this call or watching this conference. I was always chasing something, and this is previous to my diagnosis. So I should roll back a little. My diagnosis for ADHD and autism came in my mid-40s. Dyslexia was in my early 40s. So again, I didn't know what was going on. I just thought I was always chasing something. Getting new qualifications, how many hobbies, that my cupboards are full of those piles of ex hobbies. I qualified myself as a naturopath. I've got Prince 2 qualifications. There was something that I was always chasing. And when my children started mainstream education, school, I joined the PTA, and then I became the chair of the PTA, and then I joined the school governing body. So you can see there's this little build up starting to happen, and we've always been members of a political party locally, and we were helping with the Senate elections with a good friend of mine, who's Jane Bryant, who's actually a member, Senate member for Newport, and I was approached to say, would I consider possibly running as a local councillor, because there was an election coming up in 2017. Of course, it was another challenge for me. It was something else that I was going to keep driving forward, bearing in mind at this point, I guess I had two young children and a full-time job, but this just adds on to it. But when I got into politics, and when I got into the council, I got elected. You suddenly saw what you could do and how you could help. And I think I had a diagnosis. There was always this passionate drive with me that something wasn't right for somebody. If they were coming to me to help, I have to help them, and I can't stop helping them until I've seen this through to fruition. So I think, and that is very much a characteristic of people with ADHD, people with autism, is that real keen sense of social justice that gives you this unstoppable drive to push forward. And I think this is where, so for me, it's I've been there for 8 years, and I've worked my way through. So I've obviously a backbench cabinet member. I've chaired the scrutiny panel. I was then made I was a cabinet member for infrastructure and assets, and then in the last 2 years I've been the cabinet member for social services. And that to me is just, it's almost like I found my place. I'm helping people with really, really complex needs, but I get to have a voice on regional partnership boards. I get to have a voice within council people listen to me, and that's really powerful. That's really powerful to be in that position. So I think, as I said, I found my space, and I found somewhere where that unstoppable ADHD drive is a force for something really good. So that's where I am. So as I said, why politics? So now I understand. So when I'm not just consulted, we're not just consulted as part of the survey. We're actually there. We're actually defining policy. I'm saying this isn't right. This isn't going to work. Oh yeah, we want X, Y, Z, or officers or higher politicians say, right, we're going to change this now. How does this? That's what we need to do. We've taken the average person, and now I'm a voice within that room saying, no, we have to stop here. This isn't going to help. This might help 90% of the population, but there's 10% of that population that this is going to detriment, not just not help, but actually going to go into detriment. So I think I stand there now as that stopping post and that voice that is able to be listened to, with a really supportive team, political team that I work with, a group, and a cabinet group as well. So this is it. So representation matters, of course it does. And I think, as I said, just alluded to, without us, policies miss real need. They're designed for that. Let's have a look at the education system, for example, as a prime example of, it's made for the masses, but it's really, really detrimental to some children that are going through that education system, and it's so bad. So when we're there, we can now say, stop, let's shift, let's have a look what's happening. This isn't right for us, and there needs to be another way, or how do we make changes. So my big one, I guess, is why I'm sitting here as well, is that I think it was two or 3 months ago, we put a motion into Newport City Council to make Newport City a neurodivergent friendly city. There are two video clips embedded into this, but I don't think they'll play, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But just to give you a sort of perspective on how this works. So basically, a really good friend of mine and colleague and councillor, Stephen Marshall, dropped me an email and said, how about we push this motion forward? Let's work on this together. So what we did here was we wrote the motion based on how do you make a city neurodivergent friendly, but not just how do you make the city neurodivergent friendly, but how do you make it so it's not a token gesture, that it is actually workable. It's doable. So we're not just saying, right, this is everything that we need, this is our big wish list, this is what we have to do to make the city neurodivergent friendly. So we spent a lot of time writing the motion that you can see on the screen now. Again, apologies, it's a little bit blurred if you can't see that, but I'm more than happy to provide the documents afterwards if that's a possibility for me. But basically, what it does say, there's a big element in there of needing all council staff to be trained on neurodivergence, so autism, ADHD, of course, dyslexia. And the real important line in there for me was that training line, because what I'd seen from my lived experience then through my children was that you've got these amazing ALN codes or additional learning needs coordinators in their education setting, and you've got a core of teachers that are very, very they're savvy. They know how to help these children when they're in the classroom. I'm particularly talking about mainstream students with ADHD. But there are an element of people that come into the education setting, and it tends to be perhaps through supply or cover, that don't understand the neurodivergent and don't understand the behaviour sometimes, especially for ADHD, and it's because they're dysregulated. And the first thing that they would do is take that child out of that classroom and send them into an isolation setting or a detention setting. And this is when we start to see these children falling through the gaps, because they become very dysregulated. It carries on throughout the day, and then it goes into the next day, because you get that rejection sensitive dysphoria, that they think it's going to be held a grudge against, and when they go into school the next day, it's going to happen again. And then you get this downward spiral of behaviours on our children, and I'm saying that as through experience, that this was happening to my daughter, and it was always happening when there was a supply teacher, or it was always happening when there was a cover teacher who didn't know her. And I thought, right, what do we do to help these children when it's through no fault of their own? Don't get me wrong, they can still, some of these children can actually just be playing a teacher up, and I'm acutely aware of that, but most of the time it was through dysregulation. And one way we thought that we could do that, as a governor, you have to have mandatory safeguarding training, you have to have mandatory training in a number of different things. And what we wanted, the big part of this is, if what we wanted is mandatory training on neurodivergence for all staff again, and that will run through the council as well. And obviously you can't be an in-depth training, but it can be quite a high-level training of how to spot dysregulation, why people, if you've got a child that's not making eye contact, it doesn't mean that they're being disrespectful. Just a lot of little things that could be shown to governors, people that work in the council, of just little things that could really make a big difference to help. And then, so that was one part of the motion that was really important for us. Another part of it then was making the pathway to being an elected member more accessible, because the more people that we get into politics, the more neurodivergent minds we get into politics, this is when we start to see change happen. Because I've been given a seat at that table with my passion and with my drive, and I know my other colleague, as I mentioned, Stephen Marshall, is exactly the same, that passion and that drive, and we sit there. This is when you see the change happen. So as I said, and that impact of representation. So when we presented that motion to council, I had to read the motion out, which I laughed to myself, because I wrote the longest political motion, and I'm dyslexic, and I had to read that motion out word for word in the chamber whilst it was being live streamed, and then followed that up with my backing of that motion, which was in the video, but like I said, I don't think that's actually going to play. And I had so many emails and contacts afterwards saying, wow, you speak for me. I didn't realise, and they you understand me, you understand my life. And I know a number of other colleagues of mine also had the same thing. So that importance for me, as I said, in this impact of representation, is that families feel seen, because sometimes it can be so isolating, kind of, when you can't get any answers, when you're trying to get help. And we're often demonized, I guess, in politics, that they don't understand, they sit up there, they make these policies. And I think for the members, some who watched that live streamed, or some who watched it after, actually saw there are a number of people that are sat in that chamber that absolutely understand what I'm going through, how it hurts, how hard it can be, the battles that we have to go through, and they're there and they're speaking on my behalf, and actually now they get me and they understand me. And I think, again, families feel, children feel that they belong. There is nothing more powerful than fighting for your own child and fighting for other children, because they see that then as they're growing up, that it's almost the behaviour that is expected of them. My daughter and both my daughters see that the battles that I go into for them, or the battles that I go into for other people when something is unjust and something isn't right, and having that platform to stand there and fight those battles on behalf of the children of Newport, for them to be seen and for them to be heard and for them to get given the right to education, the right to adjustment, you know, is really, really powerful. And then, you know, it has this ripple effect. So the vision on all this, where does this go? So I spoke at the beginning of the summit in the House of Lords. It wasn't particularly on neurodivergence, but it was to do with children that were leaving care. But I got a seat at that table, and I got a seat at that table with some very, very powerful people that I can then network with, I can then speak to, and it allows you get that foot in. And this is where these laws are made. This is where the high level policies happen. And so I think what I want to do is by making the government sector more accessible to neurodivergent people, ADHD people particularly, you know, that passion, that drive that we have, that insatiable engine that just keeps going, really happen. Not just being consulted on, but actually making the policy. Because don't you find, so, you know, it's when the decision making processes are accessible, and when the consultations, you know, they get to the people that really need it, you know, this is, like I said, this is when change happens, because it's about the people who are shaping and implementing the policy, not the people that are being listened to. Because what happens is, you know, you can be consulted, you can say, yeah, this is what is needed for ADHD people to thrive. And then once you've done your consultation, you take a step back, and the people that are implementing that policy then might just think, oh, well, you know, there was only 1 in 10 people that said that this is what we needed. We don't need that now. We'll leave that out in so we can get that policy through a little bit quicker or a little bit more cost effective. When we're there, and I know this of myself, and I know this of Stephen, and I know this of a number of other of my colleagues, you can't drop that, because we're still there saying, yeah, but you've missed this part. Hang on, that needs to go back in. Stop. This is how this needs to do. And we're actually then telling them, you know, you can't. You have to follow it through. So that, I think that therein is the power. It's brilliant consulting. Of course we have to do consultation. Of course we have to listen to lived experience voices. I don't profess to be the voice of every person that has ADHD or autism or has children in that case. But what we do is almost like we push it, we keep it until it's finished, and we keep on. And I think having people like us, ADHD people at all those levels of government, that, as I said, that is really when we start to see the change happen. Just waiting for my slide. Oh. Sorry, I can't see to see if I find that my final slide decks are loading. Just bear with me a second. No, it's okay. Okay, so what I'll carry on though. So how do we get more people? How do we get these voices into government? And for me, I think it's we start at that bottom level, and you start at that bottom level. You get involved in the communities. You get involved in classroom council sessions. You know, you get involved in youth councils. You get involved in, start with your PTA, understand that sense of organisation, and then you can move up slightly again. And you know, there are elections coming shortly, which is both really frightening and also really powerful. I think, you know, there's a chance that we can step into place. And I just think everybody's voice matters. Of course it does. But get your feet under that table. And another good friend of mine who also, she runs a number of community groups, Jolene, said and shared my post when I was saying that this motion was coming forward. And she said, you know, this is what happens when you get neurodivergent people at that table, the table where people are not just listening to, but the table where people are actually pushing forward for policy change and moving forward. And I just think it's a bit of for me, it'll be a call to action. You know, if you know, I would say I can't recommend politics. It's a scary place at the moment because it's very, very toxic out there, and you also have to have a really thick skin. You know, your rejection sensitive for you when you hear things about you online or people say these things about you. It took me a long time to let that go over my head and let people, you know, for me to realize that actually these people don't really know me on a personal level. So what they're saying is out of perhaps frustration or different things. So that I will put that as a little warning sign that if you do get into politics, please just ignore anything that's said about you on social media or, you know, actually in the media or anything, because they don't know you, and actually ignore that, because the things that you can do to push forward are so much better. But really, it's a funny one, isn't it? I cannot recommend getting into politics enough for ADHD people, because we've got that fire in our belly and that push forward, and we can do so many different things at the same time. You know, I can work full time, I can do this almost full time, and I would not be able to do what I'm doing, or I wouldn't have that drive, that physical drive and that mental drive, if it was not for my ADHD. And don't get me wrong, you know, there have been a number of years previous to me being like this now that, you know, it was very hard. And I never want to dismiss, you know, the struggles that people with ADHD go through. But actually, when you get to that point and when you find that thing, politics being my thing, the changes that you can implement and the policy that you can help shape at a really deep level is very powerful. And Henry's of course got my contact details, and they can be shared, and I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. If anybody ever wants to contact me and ask me how to do this, how do we get into politics, you know, how can I help, anything, I'm absolutely more than welcome to speak to anybody or contact. You know, this is a very important place for us to be at right now. And as I said, not just consulted, making those changes, implementing those policies. Let's get us into every level of government, from local government, national government. Let's get us in. Let's get us into that, onto those red seats in the House of Lords, because we deserve to be there. Our representation matters, and we've got our lived experience is powerful in terms of helping so many other people coming up behind us, that I think it's just, you know, hopefully you can see that the passion that I speak with in this area. And it's for me, as I said, it saved me, I guess. Politics saved me, but then how can I go forward and help save so many other people by doing what I'm doing? And that insatiable drive I wake up to every morning, thinking, right, what today? I'm exhausted, but who am I going to help today? How can I help this person? And you don't ever let it go. And I think that's the other positive about ADHD and neurodivergent people as well, is that once you've been given that problem, trying to help somebody, we never let it go until that solution is fixed, and it can be absolutely frustrating. But you know, we keep fighting for those people, don't we? When those when you know it's unfair or unjust, you know, let me at them. Let's see what we can do today. And yeah, I think that's it from me. So thank you everybody that listened. I guess I'll just wait for Henry to come back in.
Here, as if by magic, also with an apology, because it was me in the background sorting out slides, and I mucked yours up, so it's all on me. The wonder of life, doing things live. Laura, you're amazing, and you're an absolute testament to what getting involved can achieve, and how fulfilling it is. I think it is a place where neurodivergent people, their voice is incredibly important. And you talking about, it's not just about the initiative, it's about all the other times when you go, this is missing, we've not considered this aspect for neurodivergent people. And it's the changes in the detail that cumulatively make a huge difference. That's, I think, famously done by the Olympic Team GB cycling team, which said, you know, we make these small changes incrementally, they make a big difference. And you're talking about both. It's the big changes, things like the Neurodivergent Friendly initiative, and it's the small changes, the little changes that go throughout. Now, I think you're an absolute pioneer. I think you're wonderful, and I think what you're doing is leading the way as a shining light. I'm excited for it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today.
But politics is brutal, right? Like, you're there to make a difference, you're making a difference, but the political, and so Wales has elections coming up. Like, what are your views on that and the choice for Wales coming up?
It's frightening. I think it's scary because, you know, we are looking like there's going to be a change, or however that change is going to be. But it does frighten me because obviously in Wales we're going through that neurodivergent improvement plan phase as well, where there's currently money going into looking at what we're doing. And, you know, will these initiatives get stopped? We don't know. When there's a change of government, whoever it might be, you know, whatever the work that's currently happening, how do we know that that's going to continue? But it is frightening. And I have a number of people that come up to me saying, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to sort this? But I just think it's the lack of unknowing as to what the year after. So from the Welsh point of view, then the year after we go through our local government elections as well. And it's just hard to.
So 2026 is the 2026 is the elections for the
Senate,
Wales, the Senate, and then Senate, and then council elections 2027.
Yeah, and that's a scary thing. So we're trying to push through as much as we can now of the Neurodivergent Friendly, get these in now so they're already embedded, and because we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Oh my goodness, what happens if I don't have politics to do when I'm after 27? I don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, I'd push for you in that. You mentioned the House of Lords. Like, yeah, let's make that a campaign. You're fantastic. I've got to move on. We've got to hit our times. Thank you so much, and thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for being part of this. You're incredible, and thank you for kicking off the ADHD UK second segment.
Thank you. Speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.